The camera that recorded the video you are about to hear is based on something I still cannot explain. Because everything started with a normal camera, a cheap secondhand camera that I bought from a local shop. But the strange thing wasn't the camera itself. It was what the camera recorded. Because every time I used it, it showed something that hadn't happened yet. This happened in 2019 when I was working as a freelance photographer. At the time, I didn't have a lot of money, so I often bought used equipment. One afternoon, I found a camera being sold at a very low price. The seller said it was slightly old but still worked perfectly. I tested it quickly. Everything seemed normal. So I bought it. At that moment, I had no idea that this simple decision would lead to one of the strangest experiences of my life. That evening, I decided to test the camera properly. I went to a nearby park. The weather was calm. People were walking, talking, enjoying their time. Everything looked normal. I pointed the camera toward a bench and took a picture. When I checked the photo, something felt off. The image showed a man sitting on the bench. But the bench in front of me was empty. I looked up. No one was there. I looked back at the photo. The man was still in the image, sitting quietly, looking straight at the camera. At first, I thought it was some kind of glitch. Maybe the camera had stored an old image. Maybe the memory card was corrupted. So I deleted the photo. Then I took another one. Same bench, same angle. This time the photo looked normal. No one was there. I laughed a little. Just a glitch, I told myself. And I went home. The next morning, something strange happened again. I was walking down the street when I saw a group of people gathered near a shop. Curious, I took out the camera and snapped a photo. The image looked normal at first. But then I noticed something. In the photo, one of the people was lying on the ground, as if something had happened. But in real life, everyone was standing, talking normally. No one was on the ground. I stared at the photo, confused. And then, a few seconds later, someone shouted. A man suddenly collapsed, right in the exact position shown in the photo. That was the moment I realized something was very wrong. The camera wasn't broken. It wasn't glitching. It was showing something else. Something that hadn't happened yet. That night, I decided to test it again. I placed the camera on my table and pointed it toward my room. Then I took a photo. When I checked the image, my heart stopped. Because in the photo, I was lying on the floor. Not on the bed. On the floor. And there was something else. A shadow, standing behind me. The fear. I immediately looked around my room. Everything was normal. I was still standing. Nothing was on the floor. No shadow. Nothing. But the image stayed in my mind. Because it looked too real. Too detailed. Like it was about to happen. The final night. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the photo. Around 2:40 a.m. I heard a noise. Something falling. I rushed out of my room. And then I saw it. My chair had fallen. Exactly where it was in the photo. My heart started racing. Slowly, I turned around. Because I remembered something. In the photo, there was a shadow behind me. Ending. I never used that camera again. I threw it away the next morning. But sometimes, I still think about it. And I wonder, if I had taken one more photo that night, would I have seen what was standing behind me, the things it showed me? After that night, I told myself I was done with the camera. I placed it inside a drawer and tried to forget everything. But the problem was, I couldn't stop thinking about it, because what I had seen didn't feel like a coincidence anymore. It felt like a pattern, and patterns usually mean something is real. The decision. The next day, I opened the drawer again. The camera was still there, exactly where I left it. For a moment, I just stared at it. Part of me wanted to throw it away immediately, but another part of me wanted to understand it. So I made a decision. I would test it one more time, but this time, I would be careful. Controlled test. I set up a simple test inside my room. I placed a glass of water on the table. Nothing unusual. Nothing that could change on its own. Then I picked up the camera and took a photo. When I looked at the image, my heart tightened, because in the photo, the glass was broken, shattered pieces everywhere. Water spilled across the table. I immediately looked at the real glass. It was still intact, standing perfectly still. Nothing had changed. But now I was waiting, watching. The moment. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. I started to feel a little relieved. Maybe the photo was wrong this time. Maybe the camera wasn't consistent. But then, a small vibration. The table shook slightly. The glass moved. And suddenly, it tipped over, fell, and shattered on the floor. Exactly like the photo. The realization. That confirmed it. The camera didn't just show random things. It showed what was about to happen. Not hours later. Not days later. But within minutes. Sometimes seconds. Taking it further. At this point, I knew I should stop. But curiosity had taken over. I wanted to see how far this could go. So I did something risky. I pointed the camera toward my apartment door. Then I took another photo. When I checked the image, I felt a chill run through my body. Because in the photo, the door was open, and someone was standing there. The door. I slowly looked at the real door. It was closed, locked. No one was there. But my heart was beating faster now, because I knew what the camera was showing. It wasn't a guess. It wasn't random. It was the future. Waiting. I stood there, staring at the door. Every second felt longer than the last. Then, a sound. A soft click. The door handle moved slightly. My breath stopped. Slowly, the door began to open. The presence. The door opened just a few inches. Enough to see darkness outside. No one stepped in. No one spoke. But I could feel something. Like someone was standing there. Just outside. Watching. The camera again. Without thinking, I lifted the camera again. My hands were shaking slightly. I pointed it toward the door and took another photo. When I checked the image, I almost dropped the camera. Because this time, the figure was closer, standing just inside the doorway. The face. The image was clearer now. The figure looked tall. Its body was visible. But the face was still dark, completely unclear, like the light refused to show it. The final test. At that moment, I realized something terrifying. Every photo I took brought the future closer, step by step, frame by frame. Ending. I didn't take another photo that night. I couldn't. Because I understood something I wish I had realized earlier. The camera wasn't just showing the future. It was leading me toward something. Something that was getting closer every time I looked. And the worst part was, I didn't know what would happen if I took one more picture, the last photo. After that night, I didn't sleep. Not even for a minute. I just sat there, staring at the camera, trying to decide what to do next. Because at that point, I understood something clearly. This wasn't normal. And whatever this camera was doing, it wasn't something I could control. The thought, for a long time, I kept asking myself one question. What happens if I don't take another photo? Would everything stop? Would the future change? Or would things continue exactly the same way? With or without me looking? That question stayed in my mind the entire night. The silence. Around 4:10 a.m., everything became quiet again. The door was still slightly open, but nothing else had happened. No movement, no sound, no footsteps. It almost felt like whatever had been there was waiting. The decision. At that moment, I made a decision. If the camera was showing the future, then maybe I could use it to avoid what was coming. So I picked it up one last time. My hands were shaking, but I needed to know. The final photo. I pointed the camera toward my living room. Then I pressed the shutter. The sound of the click felt louder than ever before. For a moment, I didn't want to look at the photo. But slowly, I raised the camera and checked the image. What I saw, the moment I saw the photo, my entire body went cold. Because the image didn't show the door. It didn't show the room. It showed something else. It showed me, standing in the middle of the room, looking directly at the camera. But that wasn't the terrifying part. The terrifying part was, in the photo, I was smiling. The problem, I wasn't smiling in real life. Not even close. But in the image, my face was stretched into a wide, unnatural smile. In my eyes, they didn't look like mine. The realization. Then I noticed something else. Behind me in the photo, the shadow was gone. It wasn't standing near the door anymore. It wasn't in the background. It wasn't hiding. Because it didn't need to. The moment, a sudden thought hit me. If the camera shows what's about to happen, then that image was the next moment. The chain. Slowly, without thinking, I felt something strange. A pressure, like something was pulling at my face. My lips, my expression. And then I realized something terrifying. I was starting to smile. The truth. Not because I wanted to, but because something was making me. Controlling the movement. Step by step. Just like in the photo. The last memory. The last thing I remember clearly is this. I tried to drop the camera. I tried to move. But my body didn't respond the way I wanted. It felt like I was no longer fully in control. After that, I don't remember what happened next. Not clearly. But the next morning, everything looked normal. The door was closed. The room was clean. Nothing seemed out of place. The camera, except for one thing. The camera was gone. Ending. I never found it again. I moved out of that apartment a few days later. And I never told anyone this story in detail. Until now. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone, I catch myself doing something strange. standing still, looking at nothing, and smiling. For no reason. There's something I didn't tell you before. Something I only understood later. The camera didn't just show the future. It chose which future to show. The last decision. After everything that happened, I should have stopped. I should have thrown the camera away. But fear does something strange to the human mind. It doesn't always make you run. Sometimes, it makes you want to know more. So I picked up the camera one last time. The final shot. The room was silent. The door was slightly open. The air felt heavier than before. I raised the camera slowly and pointed it straight ahead. Not at the door, not at the walls, but at myself. The image. The moment I looked at the photo, I stopped breathing because the image didn't show what I expected. It didn't show me standing. It didn't show me alive. It showed the room. Empty. Completely empty. The meaning. For a few seconds, I didn't understand. Then it hit me. If the camera shows what's about to happen, then that image meant I wouldn't be there anymore. The sound. At that exact moment, I heard something behind me. A slow movement. Closer than before. Not at the door. Not in the hallway. Right behind me. The truth. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Because deep down, I already knew what was there. It wasn't outside anymore. It wasn't waiting. It had already come inside. The last frame. My hands were shaking. But I forced myself to do one last thing. I lifted the camera again, without turning around, and I took one final photo. What it showed. When I looked at the screen, I finally saw it clearly. The figure, standing directly behind me, close enough to touch me. Its face, still completely dark. But this time, it was smiling. The ending. After that, everything went quiet. No sound. No movement. Just silence. The recording. The next morning, the camera was found. Not by me, but by someone else. On the floor of the apartment. Still working. Still recording. The last photo ever taken. Inside the camera, there was one final image. A photograph taken at 3:03 a.m. It showed the room. Empty. The door closed. No one inside. Final line. And if you look closely, in the corner of that photo, you can see something. Something that wasn't there before. Standing in the dark. Watching. Warning disclaimer. This story is for storytelling and entertainment purposes. Some elements may be dramatized.